Hey,
Hi.
how you been?
Good. How are you?
Back to work? Well, I was off all last week. I went
You
training
was
and
off last week.
I was in a training in St. Louis.
How did it go?
Good, real good.
Good. Yeah.
Like 9.5 hours a day.
Courtney talking about we late. I'm
Because
sorry.
it's early.
I feel like my camera's like too high or something. Yeah, she was up all day.
Oh, excuse
Okay.
I
So
wish
I'm
I
gonna
could
let you do a little
say
introduction. I'm Tia.
I'm Diane.
I'm a nurse practitioner, and I got Diana on with me. I'm gonna let Diana do her introduction.
Hi, I'm Diana. What am I supposed to say? I haven't watched it all the way through. I'm a licensed independent social worker. So I do therapy, both in private practice and I work with felony youth offenders, doing therapy with them.
Yeah. Speak up a little bit louder.
Talk louder. Wow. Needing to be louder than you is like craziness. So, okay. It might be because it's resting on my computer too.
Oh, okay. Could be. Um, how long you been a social worker?
Ugh, 15 years, maybe longer.
Okay. Okay. And then what do you got to do to get in the position that you're at now? Like, what if somebody was interested in doing what you're doing, like working with felony youth and the type of
So,
work you do, what you have to do?
so with an independent license, you have to get your master's degree and then you have to go to supervision for 2 years after your master's to be able to sit for your licensure. So you can get licensed at the bachelor level. So you could have a master's degree with a bachelor level license. You have to wait to 2 years after your master's. So you need 2 years of supervision while you're in practice. Listen, Courtney's talking about we're hiring. And and then you have to sit for the test. And then I'm also have a supervisor. I don't even know, credential. So you have to then have your license for a year and do some additional training in order to have your supervisor credential.
Okay. So that sounds like a lot of school,
It is. Yeah. It's like
but it's
six
worth it.
years and then 2 years of soup and then another year. So, I mean, probably 8, 9 years.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get done. Yeah. Yeah. Because you can do therapy with a bachelor level license. You just have to be supervised by somebody with an independent license. So,
Okay. Okay. And then what specialties is your license focus in or your therapies focus in?
So I have a general independent license. So when I got my master's, I did a general study. So addiction, substance abuse, trauma, things like that. I really wanted to specialize in trauma, but I haven't really isolated myself to just that space just yet.
Okay. But you're working on it because you just did a training last week, right?
Yeah, EMDR
Mhm.
training. Yep, yep. I finally did it. I was supposed to do it 5 years ago, and COVID hit. So I finally got circled back to it.
And then what is that? What is that training you're talking about?
So EMDR it's a form of therapy, a little lot different than talk therapy. You use bilateral stimulation. So when we sleep, our eyes go back and forth, right? They roll back and they input in our brain our experiences from that day, our memories, our emotions, our experiences. Well, that's also how we store our trauma, right? So, what happens is our brain may remember things that we don't, or that's why we have anxiety or PTSD. So, EMDR is a form of therapy that targets bilateral stimulation so that your brain processes the unwanted memories, kind of like how you pack for vacation. You pack with a lot of unnecessary stuff that you're not going to wear for the week, right? So you might so our brains pack the same thing. So you'll get to keep the memory, but all of the negative emotions surrounding the memory you're able to process through bilateral stimulation. So
Okay.
um yeah, it's a interesting form of therapy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
And
we
you're
we
going to
have
be
to do it on
offering
the
that?
schedule. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it
Okay.
with my current clients first, and then eventually I may open up to, because it is a hot thing because of TikTok.
Yeah.
So it is like a hot form of therapy. It does really work. We had to do it on each other in the training, and
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy how it works. Yeah.
Wow. And it works just like that? It just works that quick?
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm going to say like it's a magical pill or anything, but some people have more stuff to unpack than others, right? So
Mhm.
there's three different forms. Like if you have a very reactive person, you want to do a more restricted or short term EMDR bilateral stimulation thing. If you're unpacking trauma and that person's ready to, then you keep them in a little bit longer and their brain is going to do the work for you. I did it. So, for example, we're going to go a little off script. For example, I picked an instance that happened when I was about 30 years old, where I was walking my dog and two other dogs attacked my dog. It made me deathly afraid of other people's animals. I would freeze. I would, to the point where other animals would want to bite me. And so I use that situation. There's a lot of other parts that go to this before you do the bilateral stimulation. But when I was in the bilateral stimulation, my heart started racing. My chest felt heavy. My brain was recalling me being in that moment and how I felt. So yeah, and so I processed through it by the time we were done with that session. It's about 45 minutes.
That sounds so intense.
It
What
it
if,
can
like,
be.
if, yeah, if somebody is like going through that and they start, I feel like physically start having issues, are you able to pull someone out of that?
Yeah, it's not like a trance or anything. That's an
Okay.
interesting thing, right? So you do the bilateral stimulation. Yeah, again, you can make it last 5 seconds, 40 seconds, like, and that's going to depend on how much they recall of the event. Like
Oh,
but you process it pretty quick. Like you come out of it and you're like, okay, what did you see or what do you feel? Well, my heart's racing, my chest is heavy. Go with that, and you stay there for as much as the person can handle. You don't, you gotta use your clinical ethical judgment not to re-traumatize people. And I will say that's one of the things since I've been trained in conversations I've had with other people is hearing how sometimes people are not doing it properly and leaving people in a re-traumatized state, which is not cool.
oh
So
my gosh, that's terrible.
yeah.
That's terrible. Wow.
So there's good and
Ah,
bad, right? Like with everything
yeah.
else.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm really interested in like where you go with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you will see. I'm
I,
not trying to refill my plate, but it's a really, really interesting therapy style.
yeah, it is. I've never even heard of it. Like till you said TikTok, it popped up on that, and that's when I started seeing it more. But I never heard of that before. I never knew that was a thing. Hi, Casey. Casey said hi.
Oh, hey, girl.
All right, so we're going to talk some more about mental health because, especially this time of year, with everything going on in the world right now, mental health is so important. And I'm a huge advocate. Obviously, I have group homes for people with mental health and addiction, and it's just really, really important to me for my family, my son, the things that we go through. So there's unfortunately a lot of bad stigmas around mental health, and not talking about it. So, for you, Diana, what is like your definition of like stigma related to mental health? Like, how do you feel with that?
Oh, I could go a lot of places with this, but I'll just stay with the surface stuff. So, because I have
Okay.
two different answers, right? So, in community mental health, private practice, I mean, you get a lot of stigma just in general, whether it's family culture of, ain't nothing wrong with you, um, or it's like when you see somebody struggling with depression, sometimes that can have a negative condensation of, oh, that person's just weak, or they just can't handle things. Just stand up and brush it off, all the way to addiction, and the way people view addiction as a choice and not necessarily as a illness. So, I mean, you see stigma on a lot of different levels. Now, that is community mental health, regular, private practice stuff. Now, what I notice more so, because as you know, I am a huge advocate, and this is my biggest thing. I always say if I get my PhD, this is going to be my dissertation. I've been saying that for years, is
Mhm.
how we view culturally. or via race with the stigma behind it. You see young inner city kids struggling, and unfortunately, majority is minority. They're, oh, they weren't taught well, or they this, they that. Nobody ever stops to look at it as a form of self-harm. Sometimes when they're out here shooting at each other and there's gang violence, everybody wants to look at it as a behavior issue instead of as mental health. So, I have a huge issue with society and how they view that stuff. So that's another stigma right there too. That's the biggest one that probably I would say that's the biggest one. It's the one I'm most passionate about.
Yeah.
Breaking.
Yeah. What makes you so passionate about that?
Mainly the kids that I work with, like, well, one, growing up in the inner city, I understand the struggle, but I don't understand what it's like to be racially discriminated against, right? So that adds another layer. Just being from lower socioeconomic community, a community neighborhood filled with violence, and then you add another layer. I always say, when we talk about privilege, people were willing to help me because, all these reasons, but how come nobody's willing to help these young men that are struggling heavily with their own self-worth, and even teaching them that what they're doing is self-harm or suicidal ideation, because you're out here shooting not knowing if you're making it home at night. So
Right.
some of that is like, even teaching them, that it's the same thing and their life does mean something.
Yes, that's so important. Do you feel like that stigma stops them from getting the treatment that they need, or does it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Or people don't want to touch them. That's another thing. Like,
Yeah.
who's going to, because to be fair, doing the work that we do, um, we lose kids either to prison, because they kill someone or hurt someone, or
Mhm.
they're the ones that get killed. That's not easy for a lot of people, the secondhand trauma that comes with that. So a lot of people don't work with that population due to the higher chances of losing a client. It's kind of like addiction, right? Um, so yeah, like sometimes it saddens me that we don't have more people in the community that are willing to pour into these young people, because they really are amazing.
Right. I know you said like because nobody wants to touch them, nobody wants to do the work to get through to them, or when you say like nobody wants to touch the situation, nobody wants to get involved. Do you see that a lot?
I'm not going to say a lot, but yes. Yes, because you think about it, you're working with a young person, you're working with their family, and then all of a sudden you lose them. Losing a client, somebody that you worked with for a long period of time, is hard, and no matter what the capacity is. Now you're working with a population that you're losing at a higher rate because of the activities. Or maybe somebody follows them to your office, and then what? That's really trying to retaliate. There's a lot of safety issues. So I'm not saying I don't understand. I'm just saying it just saddens me, and unfortunately, our community, we don't have a lot of stuff for kids to really get into like we did when we were growing up. So that
You feel
hinders
like
too.
that's everywhere? Do you think there's better places or for kids that are kind of stuck in those situations to leave and restart at another place, or like how do you handle someone that's kind of stuck in that situation?
Well, you first got to start with a young person, right? Because if they take their same mindset and go someplace else, they're going to have the same problems. So first
Hmm.
you have to pour in and create self-esteem and self-worth, and, help them understand that they're valuable, because maybe nobody's told them, or maybe they've never really worked hard for anything, or maybe they've, or things have just been handed to them. I mean, you get it all different ways, right? We all come up differently. It affects us differently. But the biggest thing is you have to start there with pouring into the young person and showing them, excuse me, just how valuable they are. And not be afraid, like for me, not be afraid to talk about the racial disparities. I'm not afraid to talk about that with anybody. Societal racism, or, systemic racism. I'm not afraid to talk about those things if that's where the young person wants to go. I have no problem with that because it's true.
Right. Yeah.
So
Do you feel like I mean, obviously family and friends could be helpful with increasing their confidence and letting them know these things. So do you feel like that's a barrier? Like a lot of these kids have issues with families and that
It can
leads
be.
to that? Okay.
It's
Okay.
not always the case. Some kids just make the decisions they want to make, right? But yeah, sometimes that is it. If you're hanging around, what do they say? If you are hanging around five scholars, you're bound to become the sixth. If you're hanging around five bums, you're bound to become the sixth, right? So, it's just who's motivated in the group. Who's the one standing up and saying, "Hey, come on, we gotta get this education." I tell them, if you can run a gang and do all that, each of
Yeah.
you can take on a trade and start buying houses, and one of you can be the real estate agent, somebody can be the broker. Who's doing what?
Right.
Who's going to be the electrician? Who's going to be? But these are things that nobody ever talks about, or it's very rare.
Yeah. So what strategies do you do to help? I know there's only so much you can do like in the time that you have with them, but like what kind of assignments or homework or things that they can work with just in themselves that you would suggest?
Well, it depends. We always say you got to meet the person where they're at. So some people you're just working on empathy and helping them understand that they can have healthy relationships, right? And they need to be accountable to the relationship. So, in our facility, if you do anything disrespectful, you get a consequence. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you lie to me, now I have to doubt you. And so I do a lot of the relationally driven things with those kids. Some kids need restriction and just need firm boundaries, and that's it. Some just need to hear that you're proud of them because they're succeeding. But one of the biggest things is it's very rare I have a kid leave without their education, whether it's GED or being back on track
That's
to graduate.
awesome. Yeah, that is awesome.
Trying to remove as many barriers as you can, and then still treating the mental health, like unpacking some of the trauma. Sometimes they're not ready to go there though, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to plant the seeds that you can, and then gently pass them off to a clinician that's in a community to finish that work.
Is there resources for anybody? I guess it's for family, friends, therapists, anybody that's involved that you would suggest to kind of help with some of these situations?
So, yeah, we have community mental health agencies. There's a bunch of private practices out here. We tend to use the Zeph Center, Unison, Harbor sometimes. That is, I mean, community based. It's easy for people to get to. They're a little more flexible. So yeah, it's like different things like that. As far as like counseling, even in private practice, though, I see kids for therapy and then they still have to go someplace